Hi, everyone. My name is Amanda Wick. I am the founder and CEO of the Association for Women in Cryptocurrency. And I am incredibly excited to be joined by two of, and I am biased, but I say this in all truthfulness, the most incredible powerhouse women in cybersecurity, and in particular, blockchain cybersecurity. I'm incredibly excited to be joined by Broshevan. Did I pronounce that right?
Yes, yes.
Okay. CEO and co-founder of Hacken, and Carole, whose name is almost unfairly easy, CEO of Penumbra Strategies. And I will let them introduce themselves, but I will say, like, introduce yourselves the way that Carole House introduces other people. Because when Carole introduces me, I sound like I walk on water. And it's a habit that we all need to get into. So, Yev, let's start with you. Just tell folks a little bit about your background.
Yeah, thank you. It's actually great to be here. Like women in cybersecurity and this kind of events is something really rare, but I'm super happy that we actually starting it. So my name is Yev. I'm a CEO and co-founder of Hacken. We do blockchain security for 8 years, and I'm a cybersecurity engineer myself, and been through a lot of stuff in Web 2 and now Web 3 security. So really looking forward to this conversation and share some challenges and opportunities we have.
And Carole, you have a somewhat similar background, so share with just a lot more government agencies and acronyms behind you.
That's so true. I know Amanda also is a former Fed specialist and all the acronyms. So I also have worked at the nexus between cybersecurity and emerging tech and finance for many years. So Carole House, CEO of Penumbra Strategies, which is a strategic technology consulting practice. So whether you're trying to help innovate in financial technology to help deal with and embrace new emerging tech, but also defend against its great threats, or advising companies in the defense industrial base space. Like, it's just a really, really fun area that I'm getting to work in. I recently did 2 tours at the National Security Council and a whole background working at places like Treasury and on the Hill, as well as in the U.S. Army, focusing on this nexus between cybersecurity and other emerging technologies, along with finance and financial regulation. So I actually got to work with Amanda at Treasury in that time frame. So it's really been fun to sit at the heart of things where you recognize that most financial crime most financial crime compromises things like identity. Identity is a root cause in cybercrime. Like, just everything goes round and round. So it's a wonderful place to see connective tissue, and what greater people to talk to about connective tissue than both of y'all.
Well, I know when we were talking about doing this session, Yev, and in particular, I know you and the whole Hacken team are very passionate about getting more women into not just cybersecurity, but especially blockchain cybersecurity. And Carole, you mentioned your military background. So both of you have navigated extremely male-dominated sectors. I guess I just want to start off with a question really about kind of like moments that defined your leadership journeys in cybersecurity and digital assets. Maybe as women, maybe not as women. But I have a feeling maybe the two are tied. But like, when you look back, what are the moments in your leadership journeys that kind of stand out?
I can start. So honestly, like how I got into cybersecurity, I didn't know what to do after school, and it was one of the options that sounds super interesting for me. But honestly, I really didn't like computer classes in school, and I was just like copying all the programs that I need to do for my labs from my neighbor. But then somehow I ended up in cybersecurity, and honestly, I think something that led me to this point is like really passion for this and curiosity. And it's kind of, I think resilience as well is a good word for this, because I mean, like, they say like this cliche, never give up, but it's definitely something that's been through like all the stages of my career, because I started even in crypto like quite early, around 2014. And it was a really interesting journey from learning as a student, learning actually about Bitcoin from my professor in university when he was suggesting mining Bitcoins in the computer classes back then. And yeah, I think the curiosity and also the community, because back then when I was studying in Kharkiv in Ukraine, there were not much cybersecurity work in Ukraine in general. In the companies, the majority of them, it was in information security policies, like standards and all this kind of stuff. But I was curious enough to find people who do like ethical hacking, who do like give courses about that. And we also started like OWASP chapter. I started Besides chapter. So it's been, kind of journey organizing people around yourself that are that passionate, and I keep doing it. And now we're doing the same at Hacken. So I think and they're like this journey, it was always about passion, curiosity, and the right people around. So that's why I'm super happy to be here today with you. And I think what you guys doing is really, really important for the industry itself, and for next brilliant minds and projects.
Yeah, Carole, what about you?
Yeah, I love you asking that question, because Amanda is such an amazing storyteller. So she always really wants to like dig into like, tell us your story and where you come from. And of course, having come from the Army, which like very, certainly a lot more men than women in that service. And I'll say I was very, in that world, very used to being the only woman in the room in a lot of contexts. But it was really interesting that my first job out of uniform was at the Office of Management and Budget. So for my 3 tours in the White House, that was my first one. And we went on this big trip to a giant computer company. There was a big conference, and anyway, but the story I wanted to mention, since you asked about it this way, was like we were in this room, and I was a GS kind of nothing, like I was very junior, a presidential management fellow, coming aboard, learning about cyber. I was the national security person being brought into the cyber and national security unit to try to bring a bit of a NatSec perspective, and in a room, I almost like. Space was getting tight, and I almost got up and walked out because it was clear that like there just wasn't a lot of space. And one of the men in my like delegation or whatever from the White House like just tapped my shoulder and like encouraged me to stay seated. And he just leaned over and highlighted, "You are the only woman in this room. You are not going to leave right now. The government's going to have one woman in this room." And I was really like, I hadn't even noticed, like, honestly, it was fascinating. So from there, all the way on to certainly working on the Hill, but then at Treasury, and then especially working with you, Amanda, it was really interesting that in the cryptocurrency space, like how you get into crypto from hard cyber, when you start to hunt down cyber financial criminals, you inherently get into cryptocurrency, right? Like it is cyber criminals' favorite way to launder, to purchase their exploit kits, whatever. So that was my real diving into the digital asset ecosystem, and which is funny because I had been touching blockchain a little bit previously, just from a more cyber IT infrastructure kind of perspective. But it was really interesting to see a community that certainly like tended to be very largely male dominated. In the government, women kind of owned a huge portion of cryptocurrency stuff, especially on the policy side. Like when I was the lead delegate for FinCEN to the FATF, the Financial Action Task Force, or the UN for anti-money laundering, or the ISO for anti-money laundering, they're working with all the people from DOJ, like yourself. Like there were so many women across, like Val at the SEC, like the CFTC had tons of them. Like really on the government and policy side, there really was a huge proportion, like there was a much greater proportion of balance on the different kinds of participation and diversity that you would normally see or expect in a tech ecosystem. So it was really interesting to see that, and a wonderful community to work alongside. So I guess I hope that answered your question, but I wanted to highlight like what an interesting step it was along the cyber world and then into the cryptocurrency world, where there were so many women working, especially on the government side. I saw them everywhere.
Yeah, I remember, I think you were on the video webinar that we did back when I was at Chainalysis, when we did that very, very first Women to Know in US Government. I think it's actually on our womenincrypto.org media website, like one of the old like YouTube videos. And we were explaining to people how many of the women in crypto in the government, like how many people in crypto in the government were women that you didn't necessarily see or know about, right? And people have no idea how many at every agency. And actually, still to this day, it is an impressive number of women on the government side. That was actually, I tell this story all the time, but that was actually part of the motivation for why I started the association. Because when I got into the private sector, I was like, well, we were treated so well. We were a little like I got spoiled. And then you get into the private sector and you're like, oh, this is not how it should be at all. And you don't realize the benefit of people like that guy in the government who tap you on the shoulder. Because I do think the government is a lot more cognizant sometimes than the private sector about making sure there's a woman in the room, or the optics, or the demographics, or frankly, just the importance of representation, right? And having different ideas and having different viewpoints in the room. So I love that. I mean, I will say we do see a lot of barriers still to women. I know people like to think it's perfect. I think it's a combination of like cultural and structural barriers. I think cybersecurity, because like obviously we spend a lot of time talking about getting more women into STEM, or I don't know what it is now. It's like STEM plus more letters, but getting more women into cyber, getting more women into cybersecurity, getting more women into blockchain cybersecurity, that is definitely, I think, a struggle. And I'm curious, like, especially as someone running a women's group, trying to get more women into the professional side of the industry, what do you guys think still prevents women from advancing in Web3 security, especially cybersecurity and blockchain security? And have you seen any interventions that are effective?
I mean, that's a good question. As someone like running a company and having quite a few women in the team, I can see that sometimes we're like underestimate ourselves, and not that brave sometimes as men are. But what I see from the results of work, I think we're like overperforming while we're underestimating ourselves. So I still believe it's a lot of in our like mindset, and but like in the reality, we definitely can do it, and we have so many great examples in our company. While like people like from juniors advanced to seniors and delivering like really great job in a really short time frame. So I believe it's like all on us and our like self beliefs, and yeah, I think it's on like every of us. What do you think, Carole?
Yeah, it's a tough issue on because this brings the nexus of issues that we see even in the venture community, right? Because so many of these companies are new and burgeoning and growing in this way, as well as the technological and engineering space and in the security space, like some of the interesting dynamics that you can get for women sometimes, like really being able to break through. This really, like, it becomes this like microcosm that sort of combines all three of those challenges all in one sector and field. I remember that there was some study, and I don't know how outdated it is. I would need to remind myself, but I remember seeing that 1% of venture funding goes to companies that are founded solely by women. That's wild to me, that figure, like these figures about, and then there were other studies that highlighted how well female operated and run businesses performed when receiving that funding. Like, so basically there's a meaningful challenge there around the way, around a lot of different things. I do think that there's an extent of like the way that we advocate for ourselves. I know that many feel that some of this is that in a world where a lot of CEOs and kind of this approach now in Silicon Valley, where CEOs used to under promise and over deliver, we're now kind of doing the inverse, but that generally you're not going to see that. Like, I know when I certainly speak to a lot of people on the funding side and hedge fund managers, that they'll even note that like they know that that when they walk into a room and they're hearing something from a female founder, for the most part they feel that that is probably a more accurate representation of what the current state of the company is, versus when they hear when a man walks in, they'll like wonder how much of that is being inflated. But still the money ends up going to the male founder. So like just highlighting this, and that either way, I'm sure that both sides have reasons to feel frustrated about any kinds of stereotypes and views on this. But all of this is fascinating to me, that I think that you see both on the business side and then certainly on the tech and engineering side, like we had major challenges and focused a lot on trying to improve diversity and equity in cyber workforce hiring. Although honestly, we've seen some major some major tailwinds and gains. We did over a few years focusing on just hard cybersecurity growth, at least in that space. But this nexus of like cybersecurity and blockchain, which already is a space that is so small, like there are very few people beyond just Yev here that are in the space at all. And that, so then trying to, again, make any of those successes that we've seen in just areas like cyber, trying to bring that then into cyber and blockchain, it's a really tough one around, I think, both like the business dynamics, just the nature of like who is starting businesses and why, like, and what the social factors are that can be, and then other groups that recognize that it's really a championship and access issue, that a lot of times we aren't as willing to advocate for or ask for help for ourselves because we're worried about appearing desperate. When that's not the case, we're just seeking the same kind of advocacy that other people get. I do think that championship and access is one of the greatest weaknesses and the kinds of mentorship that people will often be willing to offer. And I'm so excited that this group called Journey to Lead like helps to do some of that. And like Amanda, you definitely work on helping to create connective tissue, and you are constantly advocating for people and creating connective tissue. So I think that championship and access piece is a big part of your story.
It is, but I will say, to kind of foot stomp something that Yev and you both said. When I was in DOJ, there were two groups. There was the Women in Law group that focused on professional development, and there was DOJ Gen, which was the advocacy group. And I met the woman who ran DOJ Gen, and I said, oh, we should do an event together sometime. And she said, no, thank you, we're good. And I was like, I thought we were on the same team. And she said, not on the same team per se. It's more like we're playing the same rigged game, and we're trying to fix the rules of a rigged game, and you're trying to make everyone Serena Williams so they have a chance to win. And we shouldn't have to be Serena Williams to have a chance at winning. And that actually stuck with me. And when I started the association, it was a huge part of her being right and wrong at the same time, that I was like, it needed to be both, right? And Yev, you pointed out, and Carole, you touched on, we're in similar circles. I don't even know how many women's events and conferences, but you do have to acknowledge that for the women who are playing the game now, Carole, to your point, you have to pitch the way that funders need and want to be pitched, which means that if they're used to the big overblown bullshit pie in the sky numbers that men pull out of their ass all day that gets them all excited and gets checks written, if you want checks written, you may have to adapt to that model, right? And you might not like having to play that game, but it's a question of how badly you want to win. Do you adapt the things that win in the game while simultaneously trying to fix the rules to say, be aware of the unconscious bias, right? All the things that you said that people are trying to do, championship access, to simultaneously make it more fair. But for the women who are playing it right now, they definitely have an incentive to become Serena Williams if they want to win. And so it is that tension. Should you have to become Serena Williams? No, that's not fair. If you want to win, is it a better strategy to become Serena Williams? Yes. And you can see the differences in the pitches of people who very quickly figure out, well, this is what works and this is what I need to be in order to get money, versus, well, I think the rules of the game should change and I want to do it the right way and respect, but it might be a longer way, right? It might not be Serena right off the bat. And so it is always this really interesting tension and discussion. And I think in cybersecurity, it's interesting because one of the things I constantly hear in venture capital is it's a pipeline problem. That one of the reasons why women get so little, 1, 2, whatever the percentage is, it's like horrifyingly small. But part of that is because of the few women that are becoming founders. And that's a pipeline problem. And if there's a pipeline problem in female founders, holy guacamole, is there a pipeline problem in cybersecurity and blockchain cybersecurity, right? And I have to believe that that shapes like what happens in the industry. Like if you just have men in the room, we've seen it kind of shape things in other areas, certainly in law enforcement, certainly in like blockchain analytic solutions. Do you think that representation or the lack of it has shaped like the types of security solutions that win in the industry, right? Like, is it the ones that overpromise and underperform? Like, does it impact security solutions, do you think?
Actually, it's a great point. I happened to be in one room and spent like 2 months with like people from 50 countries. We were like around 200, 50 hundreds, countries and 30 industries. And it was like almost, not, it was not 50-50, but it was like like a lot of female as well in that room. And honestly, it was like so fascinating to see how culture, how our like mindset, environment, like our beliefs shapes the like how we make decisions, how we think, how we organize groups, how we lead. And that for me was like really mind-blowing, because and like we're in all our bubbles, right, and in our kind of closed mindsets. But when you had the opportunity to see this from the bigger scale, you understand for what kind of users you need to build, what kind of risks you need to take into account, like what are the like flows that you don't even think. And honestly, as someone being with the kind of hacker mindset, I believe it's not about the profession, it's about your lifestyle and like how you think and make decisions. It's really important to take this diversity into work as well, because like building when you are like building like defense solutions, you need to think how offensive guys do, right? And what are their threats they have, and like what are like what they're thinking, tooling. And this is super fascinating, because something that's I've been doing from the very beginning. We started a bug bounty platform, and we have bug bounty community with like 45 ethical hackers. And when I talk, I really love talking to these people and talking to them in real life and see how they make decisions, even like go there or go there, like eat this or eat that. This is like really fascinating, because they think like really unconventionally, and they like make decisions differently. So while building like any security solutions, you need to take into account this diversity of thoughts, of tooling, cultural background, and everything. And I think it's really important, because cybersecurity is a lot about diversification of risks and different mitigation stuff.
Yeah, Carole, I think sometimes about the U.S. military and how not diverse, but it's a little less diverse. It could be a little bit more diverse. And I sometimes think if I was just a foreign nation state threat actor, I would just hire a team of women and perplex all the male militaries around the world and just be like, they'll never figure this out because they just don't think this way. Put in a web thinker and we'll just crush the tunnel thinkers. Do you know what I mean? Like, it just seems like a very risky thing that I'm constantly amazed that people who are in risk identification, threat mitigation, that they don't stop and think, if we all are the same relatively on this one axis, does that put us at a disadvantage? And it just seems like cybersecurity would be the area where men would look around the room and be like, I think I see a risk vector, like in terms of maybe a lack of diversity in thought.
Golly, I'm sorry. Like just your stories. I don't know if you ever read the book Starship Troopers. It's not like the movie. Like because not only for lots of reasons, it's not like the movie, but basically you had like in the book by Robert Heinlein, like the men and women are totally separated versus like that's not the case in the movie. Basically, like all the women are kind of the pilots and like run the big ships, and then the men are the mobile infantry that get shot out to go fight the bugs.
The cannon fodder. They're cannon fodder, basically.
It's so like anyway. It's like I'm a big sci-fi nerd, so it's just such an interesting like way of thinking, and it was really interesting for me to read that and go, oh, like that's I don't know how I definitely, especially because at the time I wasn't like my dad was in the army, and I wasn't envisioning that I would be in the army one day, but I like even I recognize that doesn't seem great for certainly one side versus the other, but an interesting concept. I am glad at some of the strides that have been made, but I recognize that like there's still, I do think, a lot of challenges that we still continue to face on the equity, like of opportunity, of access, of championship in any tech field, but in cybersecurity, that's so real. But like I mentioned, I know that there has been some progress, and I do think that seeing some amazing female leaders on the cyber side, and again, this is where government kind of has led the way. There've been a lot of really major cyber leaders in the U.S. government, focusing on cybersecurity. Whether it was, Lisa Monaco did a bunch of stuff. She was our deputy attorney general previously. You had Jen Easterly at the head of CISA, the cyber agency, and Newberger, the deputy national security advisor, who I worked for. Like, it was just there really are an amazing group of women, and I think that the greater focus that we've done, including on the military side of equity, has benefited the national security of our nation to be able to bring in quicker, better thinkers. We know this. We know that economic growth massively increases as you provide equity of access and opportunity for education things to women as well. I will say I'm hopeful. I dare to hope that as more women continue to be in the blockchain space, that maybe we will see people that care a lot more. It's speaking of trying to move away from over promising and under delivering, I need a bit of the opposite, where people are actually caring about things like security, because good gosh, I know we all thought that after the 60 million hack and then the 100 million hack and then $500 million, we were like, okay, how big does it have to get for this industry to care about cybersecurity? And then somebody told me $1 billion, and I was like, I hate that is the answer, but fine, it's coming. So okay, we'll see. And then 1.5 billion earlier this year, largest heist in history, occurred targeting this sector. Not that anyone talks about it in any of the crypto conferences, which also demonstrates actually that really, while I think left of boom, maybe not, maybe a lot of challenges and issues, and it was a third-party risk management issue and lots of other problems that occurred, but it was kind of a masterclass in response, just in the fact that the cascading effects didn't go anywhere near as massive as they thought that they would be. But again, does not change the fact that a lot of defensive measures still need to get put in place across this industry. But a really fascinating case example, I think, and North Korea is coming for this sector and $1.5 billion, and there's still so little progress. So I'm hoping that where maybe you get a lot of female leaders that do exist, even in TradFi, that are starting to experiment in this space, but also people that care a lot about risk management and mitigation, and have less of a move fast and break things, but let's move vigilantly and with vision. And that may not be fair to characterize the genders totally separately. It's just I do think that you're going to get a lot more females in this space. You are seeing an increasing amount, including due to the advocacy of groups like you and at AWIC. But I'm really hoping that then some of the understanding and expertise that women have brought in other spaces, like in insurance and security and just broader operational risk management, will certainly benefit this sector.
I do want to come back to that, which is why kind of my head exploded, because I am constantly shocked, horrified, and still somehow surprised every time the Bybit hack comes up. And instantly the discussion goes to how great the recovery, the tracing, right? The response. Everybody loves to focus on that. And for a brief time afterwards, there was some discussion about what caused it or how we could possibly avoid it or standards to put in place. But all of that was eclipsed afterwards by the focus on, oh my gosh, look how great it was that we could track it because of the transparency, blockchain's transparency. So great, right? And yet, if it's that transparent, how are attackers still managing to exploit it? Because I feel like if you can see an open door, maybe we should do something about closing it before marveling at how well we tracked down the door after somebody took it off its hinges in front of all of us while we were standing there watching. So yeah, that's the thing I can't wrap my head around. Because I know you guys Hacken just put out a security report, I think, 2025, just the half year that blockchain security incidents are now past $3 billion in losses just this year, and we weren't even done. So that'll go up when you guys put out your 2026 report. But what are people missing? How is the transparency basically still getting exploited? And what are the vulnerabilities that people are just constantly overlooking? Because it feels to Carole's point, we're in a Groundhog Day of bigger and bigger losses, and nothing seems to really change.
Oh, I mean, that's a big topic. Honestly, as someone being in this specific industry for that early and starting company back in 2017, when we kind of beg companies to invest in cybersecurity, this era of ICOs, phishing, like scam websites, Telegram groups, whatever. And I think like if we look back, we had kind of stages between like we don't care about cybersecurity at all. I mean, let's do smart contract audits. Then like kind of self-regulation on the market, pushing from like venture funds, launchpads, centralized exchanges to do at least basic audits for the projects listed and invested. And now we're at the point where kind of regulation pushes us to do it in different jurisdictions. But to your point, definitely, I think we're already past 3 billion this year. Last year it was 2.9, and definitely, Carole, like 1 billion passed for sure. We already triple it, and still it's not enough. And honestly, I think in this like Web3 bubble, we're still haven't learned the basics from Web 2, having the basic standards, basic like CI/CD security, and all the stuff that we should do, but we're still kind of lacking it, because you're also right about the over promise, under deliver, and we need to do it fast because there's like one opportunity one opportunity in the market, and it's now. And that's why I think a lot of projects doing like kind of YOLO developing, that they're like, let's just release it and then we will figure out the rest. But it might be, too late. So if we're looking at the statistics, we do these reports every quarter, so you can see the major hacks for the quarter. But I still believe the majority of them connected to operational security issues and key management, signing transactions, who has access to it and who hasn't. This is the majority of that. Then we have smart contract vulnerabilities, and everything comes to the like application security. And the other big chunk is like, of course, phishing and scams. And now with all this like AI deep fakes, it's getting crazy, even in this industry. And of course, like North Korea doesn't let us sleep without thinking about that. And I mean, what you can do, you can just like build a really robust security from the day zero, and build this like all the possible fences, from like internal security, external security audits, having on-chain security monitoring, and actually like looking to the transactions and what's going on there, and having like crowdsourced security involving community of ethical hackers, following all the regulation stuff in different jurisdictions. So I mean, that's like always about minimizing risks, right? But we should do it. And you're right that in majority of cases, people say like, they great communication, that's for sure. But standards like in Web3 security specifically are still not there. There's quite a few groups working on that, like C4 and their cryptocurrency security standard. There is some other groups that working on that, but I believe we're still far away. The best what I can see now is that and different jurisdictions, regulators have their cybersecurity frameworks and playbooks and the requirements for getting licenses, what they should do. In some ways, they're like more sophisticated, somewhere it's less sophisticated, but I believe we should have something like we have in the like Web2 space, like ISO or like PCI DSS or whatever, this kind of stuff that's like clear for everyone. It's applicable to all these technological advances and accepted in the industry. We're still not there, but we're still early as well.
Well, except, and Carole knows that's like my trigger, because when people say, oh, we're still early, I'm like, except that crypto's been around for 15 years, and there are some countries where 15-year-olds are getting married, having babies, driving, and paying taxes. So like, is 15, like when people say nascent, I'm like, don't get me wrong, yes, but are we still really that early that we can keep using that as an excuse? Because like, Carole, like, because you guys have been in these industries, right? And it's like, I feel like the time should be shorter, because most of these folks lived through this in TradFi, right? They came to crypto to build better. You're looking at blockchain technologies, and you're looking at this transparency. And I guess I thought that in a glass house, people would do a slightly better job of keeping it clean. Like in a brick house, I was like, okay, you have some excuse, you can pull the curtains closed. But in a glass house, I think it'd be just filthy, like what everyone can see, and then diagnose afterwards what you did wrong. And there just doesn't seem to be any ramifications, whether it's business, government, right? There's no penalty for doing it really badly. And doesn't seem to be a reward for doing it really well. And that's the incentive structure that I worry about, where I'm kind of like, do you guys really even see projects evolving their audit models, or do you see people trying to stay ahead of nation state level threat actors? Do you see people even thinking, how do I protect myself from the North Koreans? Like, is that even the mindset of some of these projects? Or do they think, oh, Bybit just, screwed up, got it wrong, we have better key management? Do they all just think they're the special unicorns that are somehow going to avoid the North Koreans?
I can answer that. So I was in the panel last week, and one of the solutions was to have more adults in the room, because definitely, definitely having more mature people with experience and building everything significantly.
That is usually code for women, by the way. That was actually what people called our association when we started. Like,
Really?
the adults have entered the room. Yes, it is often like code, whether they intend to or not, when they say we need more adults in the room. Like, I've seen that used for them. Somebody wanting to say we need more women without wanting to be the person who brings up inclusion. But I just am always kind of like, that is a bit of a dog whistle for me. But 100%, keep talking about the panel.
Yeah. Honestly, I see the progress, especially because we're working with clients, from their with their development teams, communication teams, and a lot of other teams. They definitely start thinking about that, and something like Bybit happens, of course, triggers a lot of processes that should be taken into account. Definitely, they do invest in cybersecurity, at least to tick all the boxes, and it's already good. So the boxes that should be ticked should be more sophisticated to to kind of minimize this at the basic level, not to be able to go further. And I think the cases like Bybit really helps the industry to put another check that should be done and another process in place to make sure that it's not happening. And yeah, I think there are other stuff that we learned this year, that we definitely need to invest in HR security, and during all these recruitment processes, and then keeping in touch with these employees, because we're still operating with people. I know there's teams now, there's two people and then 10 AI agents, but still there are lots of stuff that need to be done on the human side, operational security, and then application security. And I believe we're now getting into more processes and security on that side rather than applications. Applications is kind of becoming fairly easier, but the processes and people is definitely something. I mean, as usual, people, right? The weakest spot in any system.
Yeah, I love. Oh yeah, go ahead, Amanda.
No,
Sorry.
No, Carole, no. You add something. I was going to ask. I'll remember the question I wanted to ask you afterwards.
Yeah, this. You're right. I know, you smiled before about how knowing that this issue of, oh, it's still nascent, is such a but is it? And so much of the activity that occurs is just the same financial activity that has occurred. There are new and game-changing paradigms in the nature of decentralization, get that. But the theater that has pretended to an extent that so much of activity that is functionally the same was different did not help, and cost valuable years and valuable billions or trillions, whatever, and lots of losses and costs and consequences to market players, to consumers. It's a real challenge, because there are the stuff that is so new is the nature of decentralization is the stuff that really demands true hard thinking, and where I'm so excited about where people, including especially where women can often have the superpower of the strategic connective tissue and being able to see how those things, how they can all tie in together. I think there's a lot of wonderful thinking that can be done on how to build these solutions. But we haven't even implemented the long existent, decades old technologies and standards that have so long existed to allow for addressing so many of the rudimentary ways that this sector is getting pwned. So I'm frustrated that the sector didn't decide to pick up from where we are in emerging tech, in internet security, in financial security, and instead decided to kind of start over in understanding governance and other things. And so, which okay, maybe to an extent, if the risk is low, can allow for a lot of that kind of experimentation. But here's the problem. It hasn't been low, right? Like cryptocurrency in its current state has uniquely enabled the rise of things like ransomware as a service economies and allowed for this like high value target by North Korean North Korean actors like Lazarus Group. That does not make crypto evil. It's not evil. These are just challenges that we have in the current implementations. These are decisions that are being made by builders, by companies. Like, we can solve this. We totally can do it. And I love like bringing more adults into the room will help to address it. But it remains just a great point of frustration to see the absence of sufficient investment. And speaking of investment, the places that, from a regulator mindset and maybe from a woman mindset of looking for connective tissue. But I feel like this is more of that regulator side of looking for the centers of gravity and the hubs. This is where normally policymakers would look to investment and insurance. These are the two sectors that generally give a cue beyond like examining companies and like direct oversight. Those are natural market forces that regulators and policymakers will look to kind of say, hey, how are we doing on managing risk, right? Those are literally in the business of hedging risk. The fact that there is no thriving insurance market in crypto, we know that there's a couple of companies that are trying to do some stuff, but even on the investment side, like, why haven't these things arisen? Now, certainly there's tons of money going in, but why haven't they arisen in a really well calculated and calibrated way to drive the maturization that's been needed in this ecosystem? Because, and part of this problem, I think, comes in that, like, with the nature of cyber crimes, no one likes getting robbed. So there's a natural incentive for why they should be better at this. Like, they should want to be better at the defensive side. But I will say that on the recovery is the last portion of the cyber framework, right? Like, of the cybersecurity framework. Recovery hits at a lot of the challenges that the industry doesn't want to address. To them, like, censorship resistance above all is in fact a feature and not a bug, including when that means like an inability to recover assets for victims. And so I do think that like there's some real tensions that come in there. And unfortunately, I think that there are times when the industry messaging machine made it seem like that a lot of the views of their riskiness as an asset or a sector wasn't like like they acted as if that there was no additional risk that's here. And I think this is a great example of like where it's not unmitigatable risk. This can be addressed, but they haven't yet. So it's a real challenge that I see with some of the messaging machine and the way like the natural just incentives have not yet worked to help mature this sector the way that I think it can be. So I'm looking forward to this next wave of institutional innovation.
Well, Carole, let me pick on something, or not pick on something, but pick out something that Yev said earlier that I think is a really critical point, and especially I'm going to pick on you as a former regulator. But I don't think that we've seen the response from regulators globally, but especially in the US, changing, yes, but it wasn't a let's figure this out and enable responsible innovation. It felt more like let's see how long we can go crush this, maybe it's a fad, and then we don't have to learn new tech. Because there were so few of us, when you think about it statistically in the government, who wanted to learn about this. And I'm talking about the Fed level. I'm not even touching the state level, where now we are starting to see an interest, mostly because of the Genius Act, where people at the state level are saying, oh, I need to learn about this stablecoin stuff. And I remember training them when I was at Chainalysis in 2020. And I'm like, do you know where you'd be if you had started this 5 years ago, when we told you that this wasn't a fad, when it hit $1 trillion industry? And there is something to be said about the regulators in terms of whether have any of them gotten it right? Where are they still falling behind in like blockchain oversight? Because you see a lot of them, especially in the United States, really wanting to talk about all the possibilities for innovation and profit. But you don't yet see kind of like any movement really policy-wise towards making the industry do any better. And I don't know if that's something that we're going to see, or frankly, what agency would we even see it from that still exists or has people answering the emails and phones on the other side, right? So like that, I think my concern is like, well, now we've reached a point. Yeah, I think too, you made this like really brilliant analogy earlier where it was like, people are going to tick off the boxes, but usually the boxes that they tick off are the bare minimum that they're regulated and required to tick off. So if you want more boxes to be added, who's going to add those boxes? And how do we get regulators educated so that they add the right boxes and not BS boxes that, right, makes it look like they're doing something, but they have no idea how it works. So they add stupid boxes that don't actually protect or serve anything. And that's like the $1 trillion question. And Carole, obviously I'm looking at you as kind of like a former regulator, but like, where could they do it better? Where are they doing it right? Is anyone doing it right? If you were back in and running the world, what would you do?
I'm super curious now to hear the answer.
Oh,
And to be clear, my dream is that Carole House is actually installed to run the world. I have that recurring dream many times. So like, this is a selfish question because it's a world I think I would really love to live in. So I just want to hear about it. But yeah, I struggle with it because I wouldn't say I was a former regulator. I was on the enforcement side. It's really easy to enforce regulations once somebody else has the vision and creativity to put them in place. It's harder as a regulator, and I get that challenge. I think some people don't get that challenge, but you know, like what's in house world, what would it look like? Where would we fix things? What would we change?
so many things. Any effective framework requires so many intermingling pieces to be able to work together in a mutually supporting manner, right? Like you mentioned, policy needs to be properly like attuned and honed to be reflective of the realities of very real and present risks, but also trying to strike that balance between burden and between burden, maybe stifling certain kinds of innovation. So that's where we liked to do economic function-based regulation, to not actually write certain technologies into statute, but also to not have an undesirable like surveillance state. Like there were so many, but still reap the benefits that we want in a counter threat finance framework. So it requires that policy, but enforcement needing to be early and often. And I know that industry doesn't love that particular framing and term, but I'll tell you, most of our cases taking the better part of a decade. There was a case that just recently was settled, and it was only OFAC stuff, and it was citing activity from over a 14-year period, or from 14 years prior. That is a problem. That does not work. This is not working. Civil and criminal enforcement timelines are not happening, and lots of other disruption as well, right? Like there's stuff way beyond what regulators and law enforcement can also do, but having a really strategic mindset and coming in to look at all the levers, sticks and carrots, which is what we attempted to do in the executive order on digital assets in the beginning of Biden, to have things like the first ever competitiveness framework, and to have an international engagement framework to help drive the creation of international standards that both met things like democratic principles being built in from the beginning, but also would like help to ensure against jurisdictional arbitrage, et cetera. Like that kind of true vision, but then actually being implemented timely. I think that those are really important. Right now, I'll tell you what the answer isn't. It's not firing thousands of regulators. We are dismantling really, really important parts of the framework that especially if you have rules. We just finally passed this new framework for stablecoins that's only a framework for issuers, and even that, like there's huge gaps, but like finally we have the beginnings. And this is where the massive mistakes that occurred earlier of like not enabling that framework to be put in place way earlier. I wish that it had all been done via a payments charter in the first place anyway, because I hate technology specific frameworks. But hey, fine, I'll take stablecoin specific regulation and legislation. I do think that there needed to be an understanding of the fact that we could have strong guardrails, but create the pathway on how to get registered and supervised. This was a huge mistake that occurred several years ago, and that cost us now getting a much worse framework being put in place. So I think people believing that, like, not even people that wanted to crush the sector, it was people that thought, oh, after FTX, like the sector's going to collapse on itself. Like that's just like they've they believed that. So they weren't trying to crush it. They were also seeing these very real risks that were occurring and the sector not rise to mitigate them. So they did kind of think that just it would go away, because who would trust a sector where these are the kinds of problems that they're facing, was their perception of it. So I think that there's not been that strategic mindset, as well as seeing some of the inconsistencies in the way that different kinds of fintech and financial entities are being treated. Like, that's where both sides. So right now, I don't think dismantling is the right answer. I don't think putting your head in the sand and ignoring the reality of this. And I don't think that the hubris of believing that, oh, well, everyone will wait for the US to innovate benefited anyone. And nor did enforcement timelines that took a decade. That didn't benefit consumers, national security, or the cryptocurrency industry. So many of those things need to all be fixed. And right now, I'm worried that that's where we're focusing on reducing burden without pairing it with a really good focus on improving effectiveness.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things that breaks my heart, I mean, Carole, you and I kind of, you far more, but we both kind of come from this kind of like BSA AML background. We both would love to see BSA modernization kind of get out of the basement and see the light of day. But I think what's really interesting is that all of us that are like really passionate and geeky about this can see this path where like you could take this tech and just build a better system, right? Like, you could take the concept of a risk-based system that says, okay, you want to gobble up this risk, you should have this much compliance. And on the cybersecurity front, especially now, I think some people in tech, they don't think about the fact that the tech that they're building moves tons of money. And if they don't build it well, it loses tons of usually other people's money. And I guess I wish that there were regulators looking at that concept of, then your guardrails should match how much you're touching. Right? So if you're a Bybit and you're doing these massive transactions, you should have to have a cybersecurity program that has audits, code validations, right? Like, that there are these requirements because you're moving tons of money. You want to tinker around, have a little exchange, not move more than like $1 billion. I don't know, pick some number. Then I'm less concerned if you have 0 smart contract audits and your security is weak, right? Because the risk is less. But I wish like that even at that level, there doesn't seem to be a discussion of adapting cybersecurity requirements the way that we did compliance to that risk-based model, now that it is the movement of value and not just data. And I had hoped, and I wish that regulators would have gotten a little bit more faster on that, because cybersecurity seemed to be the thing that was like, but this actually protects everyone. And yes, you would need to enforce it because it only punishes the good ones if you put something into place and then don't punish the bad actors. And we could talk about AML enforcement over the last decade and how that was an example. But like, it's just interesting to me that that seems like a fix where if I was a regulator, I would say, look, at a minimum, we are going to say, if you are moving this much money, we want to know your key management. Like, we want to see that you have security in place for this. And I just don't really see any regulators. I mean, not even Moss or like any of the leaders that are like really, I feel like, digging into this. I just haven't seen. Have you guys seen anything like that?
So as we work like globally and we work with different regulators, we see this coming in UAE and specifically ADGM. So they are quite advanced on a cybersecurity front. We also work with them, helping them with the specific stuff. So what they have different type of companies and different type of licensing, and based on that, you have like different requirements. It's not about I don't believe it's about the like how much you like transfer. It's about the whether it's like a fund or you're like a issuer or something like that. And they have quite robust cybersecurity framework where they have all these requirements, not only like off-chain part, which is kind of basics, right, but also on-chain part. And also what I know, they do have quite advanced on-chain risk monitors when it comes to governance, tokenomics, cybersecurity, because definitely everything is kind of visible and live and you could track it in real time. And that's probably the most innovative I've seen. I also know there are some other projects in smaller jurisdictions, and one of the places where we met with you. So they're also working on this front in cybersecurity specifically. but definitely I haven't heard much in the US yet.
No, and Carole, I don't know if this has been your experience. The nimble jurisdictions, whether it's benevolent dictatorship or just smaller and more nimble, like those are the ones that I think you sometimes see these like really interesting. I mean, like I know the folks who like wrote VARA's rules, and it was like they could sit down and just come up with this stuff. And so you do see a little bit of an advantage to the nimble, like kind of F-16 countries as opposed to these bureaucracies, right? Like, and even if you turn a bureaucracy into an autocracy, you can only do so much so fast, especially if you're firing everyone. But Carole, like, I'm curious your thoughts.
Yeah, I think that this is where like our challenge with not putting in place a really clear or clearly defended and articulated prudential regulatory framework is where this comes in, right? Because that's where cybersecurity sits. And then also, I will say that AML is easier for a financial regulatory expert to sort of get and to understand than like cyber, like we've mentioned, that these are two very technical fields now intersecting with each other. Good gosh, how little expertise is there that sits at both of those things. There are regulatory frameworks in the US that have covered stuff like this. Like the SEC does have cybersecurity requirements. The bit license regime in New York does. But I will say that most of our cyber requirements are pretty risk-based, and they're like, have a program that addresses like the 5 areas of the cybersecurity framework or whatever. And this is like for all financial institutions, it's not specific and bespoke to crypto. And then part of that challenge then comes in on like, it's where the rubber meets the road. It's beyond the stage of technology neutral guidance, but on the practical, like guidance and then actual examination framework of like, how do I make sure that they've actually like detected all of the like, the devices inside of their network, or like, how are they managing, identity access and management controls, et cetera. Like, I think that's where like there's a lot of still challenges, and where like standards don't come out of nothing, right? Like even like NIST hasn't done anything specific or bespoke to crypto yet. And some of that is because like NIST, the government creates standards when the industry is coalesced around standardized best practices. Decentralized communities have a hard time organizing, and we've just talked about some of the issues of maturization in this space. So the absence of this sector picking up the torch and driving forward has been part of that challenge. And then it all comes back to then when you start talking about what controls can get implemented where, questions around responsibility, accountability, like come back. And these are specifically the things that a lot of the players inside of this ecosystem are deliberately trying to design to avoid that. And so I will say that the underlying tension of this, like wanting to avoid accountability for being able to control certain features of a system it will remain a huge challenge in this space. But I'm with you that like the jurisdictions that have been like not paralyzed by this problem of like how you have a more harmonious approach to cyber and whatever, but like coming up with some really specific best practices and approaches to examine, I think that will at least drive it drives a really important again maturity that's needed in the ecosystem. It's just complicated.
Yes, it is. Well, I just noticed the time, and I want to be cognizant because depending on where you are in the world, we said this was going to last an hour, and I could talk to you ladies for hours and hours. So I will forcibly cut myself off. But I will say for the last thing, I think you make a compelling case for why getting more women in blockchain cybersecurity is a very marketable skill that will be slow to be replaced by AI. So if you're a young woman out there thinking about what can I do that won't be replaced by AI anytime soon, I think Yev and Carole have made an exceptional case for why blockchain cybersecurity is an area that you should look into. And selfishly, I'll just ask you guys as the last question along those lines of needing a lot more women to get into this field. Aside from just being the fabulous, wonderful role models that you are and kind of being perfect examples, if you can see it, you can be it. What can women's groups, like whether it's women in crypto, whether it's other groups, women in tech, like, yeah, I know you guys are, starting your own thing, but like, what can we do to encourage women into this field of study? What works for you? What have you seen work with other women? Like, what's, to quote Reese Witherspoon, what do we do now to get more women into this field?
I think we need to get things done, honestly, and just start working on that. Something that we started like internships, and we can see how great it worked, because you're inviting people with passion and knowledge and give them the opportunity to get this practical experience, and you're like mentoring them, guiding them. And also I think it's great to have like associations like that, where you're like can be motivated, supported. There are a lot of opportunities around. You just need to be in the right circle. So I believe this kind of events, communities, and even going through internships really helps to make things happen. And it's just about the first step that we need to make, and then keep going.
All right, Carole, finish us off. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I love the closing on doing that work, because I do think that like whether it's women leaders in the investment community or in the insurance community or just exec space and Fortune 500 companies, like they're very discerning, and they're looking for things that are like proven out technologies and use cases. And that remains like there certainly like are use cases that are being built out, but this remains a more strategic challenge of the entire industry to demonstrate its utility as a technology layer beyond number go up. Like that is meaningful, and doing that work will be helpful. I also think that meeting them where they are, like to an extent, bringing in more women does mean like, and where that opportunity to also bring in more, like, as you said, adults in the room, but bring in more like traditional players to explore some of those use cases that we talked about, is to go demonstrate, like, here's this solution and how we solve this problem that you in fact have. It really is bringing that sort of capacity and understanding and empathetic narrative, as well as like demonstrated use case and capability to come in and solve that problem. So to go and find them, seek out their partnership, ask them where their unique, capabilities are especially useful or would be a really great part of this ecosystem. They're looking for like specific asks, and then they need to understand, like, when they're thinking about risk and their own shareholders or their companies, how those mitigations are coming in. I do think that like the maturization that's needed, some of that will come naturally, simply because they're going to want a lot of traditional business partners to come into play, who are not going to be interested in having all their assets stolen by Lazarus Group. Well, like I think numbers way less than 1.5 billion will get their interest and attention. So again, I'm excited about the dynamics and the competition that I think is now being unleashed, now that the traditional players are getting to play a bit more in the space, because I need strong safeguards, and I think they're going to demand it.
That's a really good note to end on. And I will just say, I appreciate you both. I'm inspired by you both. Yev, I know you and the Hacken team are doing really cool things to build that women in blockchain cybersecurity community. And we're ecstatic at the association to partner with you on that. I think it'll be great, since you have ridiculous powerhouses like Carole to help you. And it's just been an honor to talk with you both. So thank you so much. Thanks to folks who sent in questions. Hope you enjoyed it. Follow Hacken, follow Carole and me on LinkedIn, connect with us. We're really good about I speak for myself. We're pretty good about checking our LinkedIn messages. So reach out if you need anything. And Hacken, Yev, Carole, thank you so much. We really appreciate you guys. And we'll hope to see you again soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.